listening to Bleeding Page Podcast. Join authors Chad Lutsky and Jason Brandt as they delve into writing and publishing the dark side of fiction.
Welcome to episode, I think this is 16 of Bleeding Page Podcast. It's been a really long time.
Yeah,
it's a long hiatus.
Couple of weeks.
I think our last episode was Josh Malerman.
Really?
I think, yeah. And that was, it was last year. But,
yeah.
So it was, I don't remember when we did that, November, December, October.
I don't either. I don't remember when we did that
I don't remember.
It's been too long.
A lot has happened. I think I've had 2 children's books and 3 other books published since our last episode.
I've had none, which is shocking.
Yeah, but you're busy doing, playing Hollywood in Germany, helping out with the Last Kumite film, and of course your YouTube channel.
I've been busy. I just haven't been writing, but I am supposedly going to be co-writing the next movie with everyone involved in the production of the Last Kumite. So that might be my next writing project. We shall see. It'd be good because I'm really itching to get back into writing.
Yeah. I guess I should mention, I don't know when this is going up, Sunday or Jason, whenever you can at your earliest convenience. But if it does go up this week, July 11th, I have a book coming out called Broad Street Bastard, coming of age slice of life. If you're looking for plot driven stuff, this is not for you. This is like my other books, Slow Burn and Riverside and The Same Deep Water as You. It's like Dazed and Confused, but darker. So that movie just you just follow these people, and some really dark stuff happens in this, but it's not for everyone. I know I'm really selling it, aren't I? I'm like,
don't read this book.
Don't read this book because it's probably not for you. But no, do pick it up, buy it, and then don't read it. How about that?
There you go. I like that one.
Yeah, or you can buy it as a gift for somebody who likes books about dark nothings.
Dark nothings.
Yeah.
Wow, man. You should be a salesman.
Yeah. Anyway, this episode we have one of my favorites. I tell people this all the time. I don't have like a favorite writer, but I have, because they're all so different. But I have 3 that are like in first place: Stephen King, Jack Ketchum, and Joe Lansdale. Never going to have Stephen King on here, I'm sure.
I would, yeah.
We would have already had Jack Ketchum on here, I would think, no problem, if he was still alive. But we did get Joe. This is the second time I've talked to Joe in a setting like this. Such a great guy. I love his books, and he's promoting right now Donut Legion, which just came out a few months back. And then, did he say in August? He has a short story collection.
Yeah.
Things Get Ugly.
Crime and another one in November, I think.
And then another one. Yeah, another short story collection that's just got everything in it. It sounds like a potpourri of everything that Joe writes.
Yeah, he's incredibly prolific. It's very impressive.
Very. Yeah, and he, in this interview, he talks about everything from, growing up to, writing racism in fiction, and it being accepted and not accepted. Cover some of his writing methods, the drowned man story that he tells that is super freaky, that doesn't sound fun to witness.
Yeah, there are a lot of subjects covered in an hour-long conversation. I know a lot of people like to listen to podcasts at like 1.5 speed. You might have to listen to this one in 0.5 speed to be able to get everything that is said in this. We covered a lot of topics very, very quickly.
Yeah. So if you don't have anything else to promote or say, then we can hop right into the interview with Joe Lansdale.
I got nothing, man. I'm so jet lagged. I'm just waiting to go to sleep.
Get a lot written today?
Yes.
Joe Lansdale, thank you so much. for hanging out with us. It's great to see you again. Last time I saw you in this kind of thing was you were on my podcast, Paleo Cheese, and you made us watch Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
That's right. You watched a good movie.
Yes, we did, and we
That's a
talked
good
about
choice.
that, and we talked about your writing. So thanks so much for being here again.
Glad to be here. I'm appreciating being asked.
You have I wanted to talk a little bit about you just put out Donut Legion that I have right
Yes.
here. And then you have another book coming out. Is it August or September? August?
Yeah, August is Things Get Ugly.
Yes, Things Get Ugly. Collection of crime stories.
And there's
I'm
one
not done
coming
with
out
it yet.
in November.
I've read some of them
There's
already
one
before.
coming out in November too. I'm
Jeez.
sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, go ahead. You were
I just said I also have one coming out in November too. The Senior Girls Bayonet Drill Team and Other Stories is coming out.
Oh, okay, great. Are those unpublished or?
No, some are. It's a mixture of published and unpublished, and some are written for the anthology, like one or two. Others I had finished, and when we were putting this the collection together, I said I'm just going to save these, and so there'll be some originals in the collection. But there are also some that, though they may not be original, they may not have been seen by as many people. But then there are some that have been in like major anthologies as well. But I think it's a hell of an interesting collection. It also has one of my romance stories in it, that I wrote for Ferrari magazine, and it has I guess I don't know what you would call it, kind of a semi romance story, someone getting over a romance. And so the rest, then it's got science fiction, it's got horror, it's got crime, it's got whimsy, it's got fantasy, it's got adventure. I'm proud of it. It's a pretty fat collection, and I think it's got some really nice stories in it, but it's variable. It's a very unusual collections, because I don't want to just do crime or horror or what have you. I want to do a variety of different things, and that's what I've done with this collection from Subterranean, by the way.
That's great. Okay, is that the only place that we can get it, or will it be available?
It'll be the only place you can get it for now.
Okay.
It'll also be in ebooks, and then like all of my stuff, it will eventually probably pop up in paperback or some other form or more affordable hardback or whatever. I imagine it'll be about $40. That's my guess when it comes out from Subterranean. And a lot of my books, short story collections, that's who does them, because that's who does them better than the mainstream press. They do novels better, but they don't do short story collections better, because they don't make any money on them. And by the time they get all their stuff done, then they don't have much interest in pushing them, because short story readers are a smaller group.
Yeah, collections do not sell very well at all.
No, not for them, but for small press, they do quite well. Mine do well for Subterranean and Tachyon, which is kind of a midstream. It's somewhere between the small press and the major press. They're the ones doing Things Get Ugly. And so I like those kind of presses for the small, for the short stories, because I think they do a better job than the big companies. For novels, it's generally the other way around.
Right.
When you say a better job, do you just mean in generating sales, or the way they put them together or package them?
Well, you can't beat things like SST or Subterranean. Thunderstorm does a good job. I've always thought that if you really want an elite book, SST is the one. If you want something that's a little more, maybe less elite, but right down the middle, and they print enough copies, it's Subterranean. If you're looking for a really specialized press that's somewhere, I think, kind of in the middle of those, it's Thunderstorm. They all do what they do very well, and they all have a design to do a certain thing, and they accomplish it, I think. Let me cut this off. I'm getting it. It never fails,
You're very popular.
Yeah. What's that?
Said you're super popular all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's my kids.
Do you generally have this many books coming out so quickly?
Yeah, pretty much. And there are some years that I have more. This is two short story collections is interesting. I generally have one from a major publisher, like Little Brown Little Brown Mulholland published Donut Legion. And then I have the middle press, as I was talking about, this publishing Things Get Ugly. And then I have them a little bit more elite press in Subterranean books. So that's really not that unusual for me. I think some of that is changing because I'm shifting some of my focus in my career. And so there might be fewer books coming out in 1 year. Next year, there will be a Happen Leonard novel called Sugar on the Bones. And so far, that's all I have coming out next year, but that could change.
What's the shift in focus?
I'm doing a lot more screenplays. I'm supposed to direct a film next year, but with the writers' strike, I'm not sure how that's going to affect us on that. I'm supposed to direct a film in March of next year. I've got people assigned to it or agreed to it. We're not mentioning those people at this point because their things could change because of the writer's strike, which could change people's schedules. But it's a good cast that's grown out of it, and it'll be a reasonably priced film, and it'll be shot in Dallas if all goes well. So we're going to wait and see how that shakes out. And then I'm doing some scripts, for some different people. I can't really say what, and some television work possibly. So it's a lot of things that were a little more likely or a little up in the air now till we see how things, shake out with the strike.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Have you directed short films or anything before?
Nope. Never
Just
directed
jumping
anything.
into the deep end.
I ain't scared.
I like it.
I'm sure I'll do it. I think I know exactly how to do it because I've visualized it in my mind. I've seen tons of movies. I spent a lot of time on sets. A lot of my friends are directors, so I've picked up a lot of tips from them. One of my favorites was from Bruce Campbell, who I said, "What do you got for me, Bruce?" He says, "Make sure everybody's in the same movie." And I thought, okay, I get that. I really do. There's sometimes you watch a film, you think, is that person in this film? They're acting like they're doing a totally different film. And then I remember Jim Mickle told me, perhaps humorously, but I thought it was good advice. He said, if you shoot from one end like a couch, be sure you got room on the other end to shoot in the other direction. And I thought, yeah, that's also important. And that's all outside of the obvious things about, your major shots and your smaller view and your close-ups. All that stuff is kind of a given, but it really is the take on the film. It's a good script. It's based on a story of mine. The script was written by my son, who has had a couple of movies filmed. And so I'm kind of excited about it. And I just hope that we retain our cast because we may have to go back into the trenches again. COVID killed us one time before when we were about to get ready to start trying to cast and see who we could get. And then we got this time, it came out relatively easy. We changed some of the production ideas that we had and actually ended up going after more money instead of what we were doing before. So it's a few million, but it's not a ton. It's still a small independent film.
That's really cool. I'm pumped to see this.
Yeah. That would be cool.
We got to get made first, and then it's got to be good, But yeah, I mean, I'm not someone that's always wanted to be a director, and I don't. I like film, but I don't like film like I like prose. Film just does not satisfy me the way prose does. And first of all, as a creator, and second of all, is when it's done. There's certain movies I'm absolutely fanatic about. So I love film. Don't misunderstand me. And I love certain TV series and things of that nature. But it's a different kind of writing. I guess I've sold about 20 scripts. I did things for Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series. I did one for George Martin and Vincent D'Onofrio not too long ago, a 30-minute thing based on a short story by Howard Waldrop called Night of the Cooters. And it was filmed out in New Mexico, and Vince directed it and starred in it, and George produced it. And I think it turned out pretty good. It won a couple of film festival short prizes, And then I've done some longer stuff that I'm looking to see how that shakes out. I don't want to put any names to anything or say any more about it other than that. I've got some other stuff that I've done. I've done some stuff with my son, and my daughter and I have something that looks, well, it's sold, but we'll see what happens. Let's put it like that.
If you love prose more than film, what's making you shift your priorities right now?
Well, I haven't quit writing prose, but I've written to date like 52 or 53 novels. I've written probably 400 short pieces, meaning stories, articles, all kinds of things of that matter. Maybe more than that, probably closer to 400 or 500. But I've always loved film, and I've sold screenplays over the years, so it's not new to me to do screenplays. I'm just putting a little emphasis into that, and I figured that at 71, I might want to, do that a little bit more to make sure I get that out of my system as well. And I still have a play to do. I have a couple of musicals that we hope are going to happen. So I'm a busy guy,
Very.
Yeah, dang,
Very
man. I
busy.
thought I had a lot going on. You just put me to shame.
I would love to. The screenplay thing has interested me for years. Wrote one a couple of years ago. Still shopping around with Josh Malerman's company who did the.
Yeah.
I can't remember anyway. The only reason why I can say
Bob.
that is he's been talking.
Yeah.
He's talked about it, but
yeah. Josh is a good writer.
No bites. No bites yet, but it's been 2 years since I've written a script that now it's like I've started another one based on one of my own books, and I wanted to, try to, I don't know, grab an agent or something. And it's such a learning curve that I had to go back and like relearn, read other scripts and go through the software again. And because I didn't retain, it's not something, I did the one and done. And then I think I probably wrote 6 books between the two, maybe 7 between the two.
Yeah.
But I would like to do
I don't
more.
write them regularly. I write them when I'm asked, or I wrote some independents. But you got it better than I do. When I wrote my first one, I'd never seen a screenplay. And you couldn't find them. There was no internet, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And when you went to get a screenplay book, you couldn't get them, or if you did get them later, I did get it, and I couldn't tell what it was about because it had numbers, and it was like a completed.
Yes,
it was beyond the shooting script. It was like every little detail, but I didn't see that till I had written a screenplay for Dead in the West, which I optioned about 11 times and finally sold for quite a bit of money, and they never made it. And it ended up owned by a French company. I know that Don and Bruce tried to get hold of it once through, I don't know if it was Lionsgate or one of those, and the guy wouldn't do it. And yet he wouldn't go into partnership with them. And yet they never filmed it. I don't know all the details to that. But that the reason, what I looked at when I did it, I said, what happens next? What have you got to think about in film? You can't tell people things they can't see. You can do certain things in the directions that give excitement to the readers and make them understand something. You can do a metaphor or a simile to maybe give the description, but you really, you're not there thinking this is what he's thinking. I've seen screenplays like that and I hate them. I just don't think, I think the actor likes to decide what they're thinking. And I think you put them, the information there and the dialogue, and then they interpret it. But I also don't believe a screenplay is just a blueprint. And when I write a screenplay, you can print that and read it aloud, and it's going to sound pretty damn cool, is my belief. I write a screenplay like I would approach prose, but I don't have the same idea in mind because there are limitations to what film can do as compared to what prose can do. But I think that I always keep that in mind, and not ever seeing a screenplay before, I just made something up. I knew that they had a fade in and a fade out, and I don't even always use that anymore, but they would have fade in, fade out. And I thought, okay, they cut from one scene to another. And I would say cut every time I do the scene. Later on, I learned that they dropped cut. I think it was still used when I was writing my first one, but I didn't know that at the time because I couldn't get a screenplay. I didn't know where to get one. And like I said, there was no internet to check it out. And we didn't have a bookstore in town. I was like used bookstores, but I had no idea. But the first one I wrote, I was successful with it, in the sense of optioning it and selling it, even though it didn't get made. I did another one for John Irvin, who directed Ghost Story. It was for my novel Cold in July. First draft screenplay was pretty good. By the time it got through, I didn't even recognize it anymore. By the time I'd done revisions, some asshole had come in and done some revisions on it. And then I sold those Batman stories to the Batman, the animated series. And I love doing those. And they pretty much shot them like I wrote them, and I like that. I find screenplays easy to do. I don't mean to say easy in that, silly sense that it's effortless, because it's not. You're trying to do the best you can. But after you've been writing novels and short stories, it's like a walk in the park.
Sure,
the thing you got to do is keep in mind that it's beat the clock. You've got to know how much time that you've got. If you've talked to the guy and said, well, to make sure it's not over 90 minutes, then you've got to have that in mind. Or, maybe 110 minutes, 120 minutes. And it's an epic, maybe 2 hours, or maybe you're writing for television. And in the old days, like when we would write the Batman scripts, you had to kind of have the beats down for the commercials, when the commercial comes in. So you want to end on a high point and pick up on that high point when you come out of the commercial. And so you're actually not getting 30 minutes. You're getting something like 22, 24. I no longer remember exactly what it was, but you've got to have that knack. And I had that knack. And I've always loved movies, and I think I understand movies. I think I understand what movies are supposed to look like. And I think I understand the language of movies in a more general way. The scripts I wrote originally for Dead in the West and for the Batmans, I actually pre-directed them. My direction stuff is in them, and you're not supposed to do that, but I didn't know that. And they loved them. And like I said, I was fun to see your stuff shot in Batman, and pretty much like I kind of pre-directed it. I didn't direct every scene in a big obvious way, but if I thought it needed a close-up or a wide shot or whatever, I went in and did it, and that's used more minimally these days, and I understand why. And I do scripts different ways. The one I did for Ridley Scott, I wrote it in a kind of really poetic way. I gave it a kind of poetry, and it never got made, but they loved the script until they didn't. And that's the way it works in film. You have something, then they optioned my novel, The Big Blow. Millard Kaufman did a screenplay. Millard Kaufman did Bad Day at Black Rock, Dog Day Afternoon, or at least I think maybe he was a co-writer on that. I mean, he's a great scripter, but they didn't like his script for whatever reason. They wanted something closer to the book. So that's what I did. And when I turned it in, they were very happy. At that time, Jake Scott was going to direct it. And then it fizzled out. And then I think they brought Owen Moverman in, or somebody else who did a script. And, that's the business. I'm going to make a lot of people mad here. I don't think script writing is an art form. I really don't. I don't think there's anything artistic about it, except maybe how you put it down. But it's not an art form. It's a craft. And the reason for that is you don't write screenplays to just read them aloud. They're written to be handed by a bunch of people to interpret them. So even if it is an art form and you're just the most beautiful artist that ever wrote a line, now you hand it to somebody else. If you're lucky, a lot of other people may be very, very good, and it could turn out to be a piece of art, but it's not an art form because it's not designed just for you. I don't think that you do art necessarily by committee, but I think sometimes something happens and turns out to be art, and it's probably a goddamn accident 90% of the time. You write the script, and the director interprets the script, and then you give it to the actor to interpret the script, and then you also have the people who build the sets who interpret the scenes and how they should look as far as sets go. And then you got the goddamn weather to worry about, and then you've got tons of other little incidentals. We're like when we're shooting the Happen Leonard series. One day I remember Jim Mickle was supposed to shoot outside, but it came a hell of a thunderstorm and a rain that day. So they ended up using a green screen. It worked great, but you have to be on your toes, And so the movie has so many components and so many putting their. I don't believe in the auteur series idea unless you write it, direct it, produce it, star in it, build the sets. Then you are, but otherwise, everybody is putting more into it, and a director probably is more like organizes stuff. Keeps everybody from going nuts. But I don't think they're any more important in the end than the script writer and all of the people participating in it, the cinematographer, the people that are, the PAs, the whole thing. Everything has its place. It is a community effort.
It's funny you say if you do everything on the movie, then maybe it's more of your thing, because I watch a lot of those on my YouTube channel that we call them Vanity Projects, and they're god awful.
Yeah. So, I know. That's kind of my point too. They're not Bergman.
That's really funny. I don't want to. I want to go back a second. You said you wrote a script for Ridley Scott?
Yeah, based on my novel, The Big Blow. They optioned it years ago. I think it's been optioned 20 years. Every once in a while, it'll pop up again. I think Owen Moverman at some point was not only wrote the script, was supposed to direct it. It didn't happen. There was Mark Romanak was supposed to do it, and it didn't happen. He was going to use my script, and it didn't happen. And then there was a couple of other people over the years that have been, every few years it pops up, it's about to happen. And, I never get excited. Film is one of the least things for me to get excited about, because you never know what's going to happen in film. Yeah. I cash the check, and I'm a producer on some things, an executive producer on others. And my take is simple. Like The Thicket, I didn't have anything to do with it. I wasn't a producer or anything. Didn't write the script. I cashed the check, hope for the best. But when I'm on something and I'm a co-producer or an executive producer, I feel like I at least get to say something about what I think should be done, and then they get to ignore it and do what they want to do anyway. But at least I feel like I've had my say, and I think there's something to be said for that, because, we really don't want to make the dog a superhero because it's dead, or whatever, I'm winging it here, guys. But the point is just, you always have people in writers' rooms, especially, is that they want to piss on it somewhere so they can say, that's my pee that you see in that scene. And it sometimes doesn't have a goddamn thing to do with whether it makes the scene any better or not, because they're all actually competing against each other, not with each other. I mean, the best of them work together, and there's certainly plenty who do, but everybody's trying to come up with their ideas, and they may be ideas they've had for years that don't fit in this particular project, but by God, they're going to stick it in there anyway. So, you're going to have the elephant in the background or whatever, because everybody can point to what they did. And that's one of the problems with writers' rooms. Now, if you get a good writers' room and everybody's riffing off one another and really trying to say, this is the project we're doing, let's try to make it come to life as it was meant to be, not as we want to force it to be. In other words, you don't want them to try to cut the elephant's trunk off and pretend it's a rhinoceros. You want it to be what it was meant to be, what they optioned it for in the first place. And it always kills me that somebody optioned something, they change it so much, you think, well, why didn't you write your own goddamn idea in the first place? Why would you go to all this trouble and pay all this money, and your intent is to fuck it up? I never understood that, or to make it something other than it isn't, even if it's good. Why do that,
Is that what you were saying happened to Cold in July?
When the first time when I did the scripts for John Irvin, but it lay fallow for 7 years, and then it was picked up by Jim Mickle and Nick D'Amici, and they did me right. There are things there's nothing they're going to make mine that I'm going to be 100% happy with, unless it's Bubba Hotep. Because even Cold in July, I loved it, but there were things I wish that they had done. There you go. There's a man with fashion sense. Is that I wanted it to be more like the book, but you know what? They did me right. They treated me well. Same thing with the Hap and Leonard series. I think it has some of the writer's room feel to it at times, but I'm very pleased with it. I've been very fortunate. Mine, even the Love, Death, and Robot adaptations they did of stories of mine, I was happy with them. I thought they did a marvelous job, you just never know. And The Thicket I haven't seen yet. I'm hopeful. It's got, Peter Dinklage and Juliette Lewis, so it's going to be interesting anyway. Good actors.
Yeah. Do you have something, Chad?
I'm actually reading The Thicket right now. It's one of those books that I've got a handful of books that it's like I'm not reading them because I'm waiting for like the perfect day. Stephen King's The Stand I've never read. That's one of those books. The Thicket was one, but I'm like, they're doing a movie. I got to read it right now because I don't want to run out of, nobody wants to run out of their favorite author's stuff. I mean, I still got a lot to read, but
when it comes to me, there's plenty,
Yes. It's hard to keep up. I did want to ask you about the Donut Legion. The main character in this is Charlie Garner. Is there any chance that you named him after James Garner, as in Rockford
It is.
Files?
That's exactly who I named him after. Is one of my favorite actors of all time. He made a movie here in Nacogdoches. Yeah, he made a movie here in Nacogdoches. Many years ago, and it was oh God, it had two names, and that's what always screws me. I've read the novel it's based on too, and it's about the end of the train era when trains were really important. And he still runs a train out of a small East Texas town. I don't know if it's East Texas in the film, but it's he ran it out of here. I got to meet him very briefly because he's like one of my all-time favorite actors in the best Marlowe ever in the not the best Marlowe movie. But he's to me he's my idea of Marlowe.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I wrote a character because I'm a huge Rockford Files fan, and so I have a character named Garner as well. And I saw that, and I was like, I wonder if I'll bet because Joe's big on. He's probably a Rockford Files fan, but
well, the Americanization of Emily. It's just a fantastic movie with James Garner. I think it's one of his 3 or 4 better films. The Great Escape. He's not the only lead in that. It has Steve McQueen in it. It has a number of actually, well-known actors, some who came out of that and became better known, Charles Bronson. A ton of these people were in that film, but I just love Garner because he can say those smart ass lines more believably than any actor I know, maybe Humphrey Bogart, Robert Mitchum, perhaps. Those are among my favorites right there, The Long Summer of George Adams. That was the name of that film. The Long Summer of George Adams.
Okay. I have never seen that. I don't think I've ever heard of it.
It's a good book. It's not an action piece or anything like that. It's a character piece, and it is an extremely good character piece. And I loved it, And the lady in it, I'm trying to think of her name. She had friends here in Nacogdoches, and that may have had something to do with why they ended up here. I don't know. But, Rod Stewart, you used to see him around because his wife at that time had family in this area because I think she was from Tyler or someplace right nearby us, Nacogdoches is a weird place. It's where the Marx Brothers got their start. It's where Davy Crockett stopped on his way to the Alamo, and they asked him to be a politician. He's went ahead and went to the Alamo. I bet when the Mexicans were coming over the wall, he thought, I should have been a goddamn politician. He'd already been a politician. He had lost his Senate, I think it was. And he said, well, you can all go to hell and I'll go to Texas. And he did. But the Marx Brothers, they got their start because they were a singing act. And then all of them were in it. Zeppo, Gummo, everybody was in it. And they sang at the old Opry House downtown, which is still here on the top floor. And they were so bad that there was a mule fight out in the lot where 2 mules were kicking at each other and snapping at each other, that everybody left them and went out to watch the mule fight. And when the mule fight was over, they came back and the Marx Brothers started making jokes. Nacogdoches is full of roaches. And if you ever see Duck Soup, they talk about the Free State of Fredonia. Well, we had the Fredonia Rebellion right here in Nacogdoches, Texas. We have a street called Fredonia. And so when you see the Marx Brothers, the Free State of Fredonia is inspired by Nacogdoches.
Huh. I had no idea about any of that.
Yeah, and it goes on and on, I remember Bill Paxton came here, and I don't think he believed me when I told him about the Marx Brothers. I had to take him over and show him the plaque, where they talk about it. And Groucho talks about it in the book Why a Duck, and so there's, people like Bonnie and Clyde, they used to hole up here, and they holed up in my hometown of Gladewater, which is where Elvis and Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis, Ray Price, all of those people used to play live on the radio station in Gladewater. And I was a little child and I was hearing them, but I had no idea it was live or just down a street, a highway about a mile from me. Because, I was like 4 or 5 years old, whatever it was. And I'm hearing this stuff and going, what the hell is that? I've never heard something like that. I'm used to Hank Williams and Hank Snow, which I still like. But, that was all that went on in East Texas that people don't think about. Probably after Sun Records and Louisiana Hayride, Gladewater was probably the prime place for rockabilly music and early rock and roll and certain kinds of country, and kind of like in a grand circle, they turned that place into a music studio. And my daughter, who's a professional singer, did 2 songs there, recorded 2 songs there, and she got to sing where Elvis and all of them stood. And you can still see where Jerry Lee Lewis scratched his name into an old soundboard, which they've hung up on the wall. And he used to stay in people's houses. There's a museum downtown, the Gladewater Museum, which I'm old enough to be in it. I have my own little section. But then there's the big music section, and there's pictures of Elvis and staying in people's homes and all of that stuff. So he got a big boost out of, Gladewater, Texas. And a lot of my stories are inspired by Gladewater, Nacogdoches. In other words, East Texas.
What is it about that area that has so much? Why is there so much history being made? There's so many arts.
I don't know the exact answer to that, but it's a unique place. It's an interesting place. It's some of the people, here, their political views and religious views are nothing like my own. But if I were to have a car break down and I was going through some small East Texas town, if you were from another place and you were going, there's people that would stop and help you fix that car, probably give you enough money, give you a dinner, make sure you were on your way. There still is that true hospitality. But, there's also Texas is one of those places that has always been more independent than sometimes maybe common sense warranted. And it's not so much a conservative state as it's a non-voting state. A lot of people don't vote, and Texas was a country before it was a state. Our Texas was its own country after it got loose from Mexico. And it was a country for quite a few years, not real long, but a few years. And then it became part of the Union. But that whole idea of being independent and being independent people has stuck. And I think interesting art comes out of that area because there is that kind of independence and people that are pushing back against some of the conservative aspects of it. And I think those are dual reasons. People used to come to Texas in the old days to get away from being criminals or to get away from a bad, situation. They used to write on their post GGT, which meant GTT, gone to Texas. And so that meant when you saw that, that's where they were. They were in Texas. And East Texas, everybody had to pass through here. East Texas had a large Black population, so that brought Southern cooking. It brought influences in music. So I think that, that's kind of the reason. And I think places like Tennessee, a lot of people who settled here came from places like Tennessee. So like Nashville, Tennessee, and places like that. This is a lot of people here are descendants of Tennesseans. My grandmother came to Texas in a covered wagon. She died at nearly 100 years old back in the 80s. She was born in the 1880s. Saw Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. My dad was born in 1909. Mark Twain was still alive. He died the next year. And more than that, Buffalo Bill was still alive. I think he died about 1917. And then you had people like Annie Oakley and all of these people that and maybe people don't know who the hell they are anymore, but those people were alive when he was a boy. And it's amazing to think about that, because just a few years before that, his older uncles and stuff fought in the Civil War. Some of them were Indian fighters, as they used to call them. So you got an interesting collection of people. The Texas Rangers were formed here, and there's probably no other group like them. And they were essentially just a bunch of damn thugs originally. And they were murderous. They were, but yet they were also functional and scary at the same time. So it's an interesting state. It has a very interesting history, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of people who came here for independence, right or wrong.
Oh, that's really interesting. I just had no idea how much came out of that area of the state. My brother lives just outside of Dallas, so I've been there.
Especially Lightning Hopkins, he's from our area, Houston, but he played in places like Crockett and Nacogdoches and different places like that when he was making a living as a troubadour, essentially.
Okay.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Jason?
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, do you have any writing questions for the people who are listening for writing
Well, I
tips?
do have something that I've always wondered. It's kind of writing related, I guess, but not like the craft of it. Joe, you if you've read, people have read enough of your stuff, you start to notice a running theme through a lot of your stuff where it involves water, like people drowning, running their car off the road into water, cars at the bottom of lakes and rivers, money at the bottom. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall at some point seeing an interview, reading an interview where you had talked about having an experience with a dead body in water. And I hope I'm remembering that correctly.
No, you remember that correctly. That particular experience, I wrote an article about it called The Drowned Man, I think is what it's called. And one morning, the night before, I worked in the rose fields, and I was going to go. We were digging roses at that time, which means they had a machine that would come up, dig it, shake it, and then we'd pick them up. And they were really heavy, and you'd throw them in the back of a refrigeration truck. And you would work from daylight till dark, and they'd use a spotlight for you to work at night. And so we were doing that. But then it came a storm, and my boss said, it's supposed to be really, really icy and cold tomorrow and nasty, but we still need to get these roses out of here, and we're going to work in the morning, and I'll come by and pick you up, which of course I guess was his way of assuring he had somebody to work, but I'd done it anyway. I needed the money, and I was young, strong as an ox. And so that night it came in a giant, nothing like they expected. It was much worse. It was freezing, it was sleeting, and then if you looked out with the rain, it was running through our property. It was just water running. It was all running up to the steps on the porch, over the part of the steps on the porch. It looked like a view from the poop deck of Noah's Ark. And so I'm out there looking at that going, damn, I wonder if he's coming tomorrow. Yeah, he was coming. Well, the water subsided enough that he would come to pick me up. And as we were going to the rose fields, which, we're out in a section in the woods, kind of went down the woods, and then there was a big clearing with the rose fields. But as we were going, we were crossing this bridge, and there was still ice on the bridge a little bit. And we were going across it. And as we did, we looked over to the left, and we saw a big toolbox lying in the water. And the water had, it kind of gone down a lot now. And so it wasn't so high. But my boss, Mr. Walters, he said, that looks like a toolbox. Said, we might want to see what that is. It could be somebody's toolbox got washed away, whatever. So we went down and we looked. And as we were under the bridge near the water, and we could see the toolbox, but I turned my head and I looked, I could see a pickup truck like this angle. And, we thought, damn, there's somebody might have ran off in the creek here, especially at night. They could have been washed off the bridge or ran off of it because of ice, whatever. And we went around to the other side and went down, and it looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy behind the wheels, because he had been underwater long enough and cold enough that he was disfigured by swelling, and he was white as a snowball. You know, he was just unbelievable. You know, he was dead. And I never forgot that. And in fact, I was working to write. I'd already sold some articles, but I thought then, you know, life is short. You know, you don't need to be sitting around here pulling your Johnson. You got to work because there's nothing, you know, you got to pay bills. And we also had a goat dairy and we were raising hogs, and all the food we ate went during the growing times. But I thought I've got to work harder. And it was a turning point in my life. And it was so bad that it continued and they actually ended up canceling work because it got bad and they didn't have any work for a while. And I remember my wife, she got a job because she usually worked in the rose fields with me, but she got a job loading trucks with lunch meat, refrigerated trucks. And they gave her a little suit that she had to wear to go into the trucks with the lunch meat. And she told me, she said, look, you've wanted to write full time. Can't do that, but I can give you 3 months. And you take those 3 months and you write every day while I'm at work. But when I come home, you damn well better have something. And being scared of my wife, I thought it might be best if I get some work done. And so I didn't know what you were supposed to do. I never read a book on writing. I just read books. I love stories. I never had there were no creative writing teachers. I don't have a college education. I have a partial college. I have about 60 hours. So I just got my manual typewriter, which my wife claims I married her for her typewriter. And this Montgomery Ward's typewriter, and I started writing pages, carbon, all that. And every day when she'd come home, I'd have a short story finished. And I did that for 90 days. I had 90 short stories. And
wow.
I put them in
How many of those were good?
With return. None of them. And so I put them in there with return postage and envelopes, sent them out. Over the next 4 years, I kept writing, but over 4 years, because it took that long, because they had to go out in the mail. Somebody read them right away. Somebody didn't, whatever. So they would come back. And so I would put I could send one story to 10 or 15 markets back then, which that doesn't exist now. So I literally, my wife and I counted them. I had 1,000 rejects, 1,000 even. And you could put them on the wall. And later on, when I had a book that they wanted to do of those old stories, in the limited editions, we put some of the rejects inside those for people, so that those people that got that all got a reject from my, editors at that time, and or would be editors, more like it. But I was learning how to write by getting all the shit out of my system. And a few years later, a few of those stories actually did sell, and they're not great, but they weren't bad. And I was writing to market. I was trying to, but I didn't know what the market was. And then when I finally decided you got to forget the market, you got to write for yourself, you got to write like everybody is dead, I started selling. And I started selling better stories. I'd sold some things before that, but that was a turning point for me. And the Drowning Man, or the Drowned Man, was the catalyst.
I was wondering if I've always kind of wondered if that was not to say all of your stuff is loaded with lakes and people drowning and cars going in.
There's other reasons for that too. But
I would just wonder if it was therapeutic, or if it was a Texas thing. I didn't.
Well, it was therapeutic, but it was also metaphorical. It things under the water designate things unseen. And that's the same thing for characters and stuff like that. When you're writing that stuff, I'm not overly big on this is supposed to represent this or this is supposed to represent that, because I'm too involved with telling the story. But there is that, and I've read a lot of literature. I've read a lot of genre. I've read a lot of, to me, it's all of it's literature if it's any good. But all of those things, it matters to me to set the tone of the story and to give the impression that if there's something under the water unseen, that there might be something within a person that's unseen until it's kind of like the water dries up and it's revealed. Moon Lake, I played that a lot.
Okay, well, cool. I hope I didn't stir up any. I was just curious. I assume it's a long time ago that you could talk about it, because I'd heard you talk about it before.
I never could not talk about it. I mean, I'm pragmatic, and I didn't kill him. I didn't drown him. I just felt sorry for him. You know, I felt sorry for his families, who I really felt sorry for, and I didn't even know them. My boss knew them. He knew the man. He knew who it was because he recognized the truck when he got up close. And of course, I felt terrible about it. But it wasn't like a traumatic experience. I've had a lot of things in my life that I think some people might consider traumatic, but to me, you just roll with the punches, and everybody's different. I don't necessarily say that anybody has to be like me or that the way I do it's right or wrong. It's just, I guess it's just my nature. I'm not stoic exactly, but I am pragmatic. There's what you can do and what you can't do,
Yeah. I did want to ask you about, I know that you write by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
I write the same way, and I when I started, I've only been writing for, well, like professionally or whatever, for 9 years. But I noticed as I was doing that and started, hearing more about you and your process, that there were some similarities. And every time that I would find out something that you were doing, that like, writing, pantsing it, and then I found out Lansdale's do it. So it always gave me this, it's okay to do it. This guy writes great. You love his stuff. He's doing it. Keep doing what you're doing. And then I found out, that by the time I'm finished with the first draft, it's very clean. And I don't know very many people who really do that. I found out you do that. And so it's like, okay.
Yeah, there are quite a few people that do it. Some people will write by the seat of their pants, but they'll end up doing multiple drafts. And I don't. But there's another way of looking at it, is when you're working on a word processor, it's different than when I used to write and I'd have a trash can full of paper at the end of the day as I corrected as I went. I didn't originally did that. I tried doing outlines, all that stuff. It didn't work for me. It just made me miserable. And trying to do a bunch of different drafts just made me just want to quit. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to look at that shit. I'd already read it, and I wrote it, I read it, and I don't need 10 drafts of it so I can save this one cool line or something. So what I started doing was that when I'd write it on the computer, and I loved the computer, I was glad to give up the typewriter once I didn't want to do it at first, but once I started doing it with the computer, I was much happier because I was proofing every day. And you don't know, psychologically, you put off doing that if you're doing it with a typewriter, because it's so hard to get to retype the entire page, or you mark it. I was noted for having some of the messiest manuscripts, around. And because I would mark them out with whiteout, and I would have notes in the margins, and it was just terrible. But I started saying, I'm going to do one draft, but that doesn't mean I'm going to take one hit. I'm going to do that draft now, and then at the end of the day, I'm going to polish it, or I'm going to polish as I go. I might finish a paragraph or a page, and I go back and rewrite it till it's like the way I want it. Now, I might get to the end, or to the middle, to the end, and realize I need to go back and add a sentence here or a paragraph there to reinforce something I've come up with later. But it's sort of like my subconscious already knows that story. It's not like I'm doing anything wizardly. It's my subconscious feeds me stories constantly. And I've always had a large supply of stories. And so it just says it's ready to do this one, Joe. So every day I would get up, I'm ready to go, and I very rarely even think about it. I come in after I have my coffee, I just start writing. If I put one sentence down, I'm going to write 3 to 5 pages. And that's my goal, 3 to 5 pages a day. Some days I'll get 10 or 15, and I may not even be able to get that all proof that day, but the next morning I'll read it over before I continue. So when I get to the end, it's 98 to 99% what I want. So I don't do another draft, I do a polish, and that means and once in a while you'll have a book where it's just contrary and you'll have to make more changes than you normally would. But that is pretty much the way I write most everything, And like I say, there's been a few exceptions here, but not much.
That's funny. That's exactly how I write too. My second draft is just like typos and maybe fix a little bit here and there, but I don't rewrite much.
What happens is, a lot of people, there's the regurgitation draft, which works for some people. My daughter just finished her first book, and I think she's somewhere kind of in between. She does a bit of regurgitation, and then she fixes them, so she does probably a little bit, maybe 2 drafts and a polish or something, but it's her first novel. When I was first writing them, I had no idea how a novel was written, no idea how a short story was written. I just read them. And I had this weird idea that I would take newspapers and no, my wife did it. She would take interesting articles that had nothing to do with one another, and I would try to find how they connected or how they could be connected. And I started doing that, and I wrote some short stories that way, and I sold them. But I didn't want to keep doing that because it's difficult. But what it did is it taught me to think outside of the box, as they say. It made me think that a story could be going along being this, and then all of a sudden it could be something else. It's got to make sense. It's got to be connected. But it taught me a different way of looking at stories. And once I learned that lesson, I could abandon it. You know, I didn't need to do that every time out. But for me, never having any idea how anything was written, and writing books I thought were all just awful. I read one writing book that helped me, and it gave me one piece of advice. And it said, if you write a page a day, by the end of a year, you'll have 365 pages. You'll have a novel. I thought, ooh, cool. And all the other information in it, it was called One Way to Write Your Novel. And all the other information in it was, forgotten, no big help. But that one thing turned a corner for me. And so what I used to do is when I finally ended up working at Goodwill Industries, I would come in at night. We would have dinner together. We would maybe, read, or maybe, TV back then you watch, like there's 3 channels, might be one show you want to see. Sometimes we'd watch that or watch the news, and generally we would go to bed and read. Well, when it became 10:30, I would get up, my wife would go to bed. I would go write until I either had 3 pages or it was midnight. When it was midnight, I went to bed because I had to get up at 5 because we had to milk the goats, milk the goats, do all that. Then I had to drive to Tyler, which was about 20, 30 minutes away, and go to work. And then when I got off work, I'd come back and repeat the whole thing. On the weekends, I would get up in the morning and work through Saturday and Sunday, because back then I worked more hours. Now, I learned years ago, I do better if I work 3 hours a day, because I just start getting diminishing returns after that. And I'm not having fun. And so if I write 3 hours a day with 3 to 5 pages in mind, with not doing multiple drafts, I'm shitting at high cotton. I'm happy with that.
Do you write every single day?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that I've never taken a day off. Sometimes you have things that come that you have no control over. And then once in a while, I'll finish a project. I might take a day off, but it's not uncommon for me to finish a project, say it's a Tuesday, and start a new one on Wednesday. I believe in keeping my paw in all the time, because I think that when you stop working, you actually almost have to relearn a little bit of it if you stay out too long. You might take a day off, a week off, but when you start getting into a month off or 2 months off or 3 months off, you're not keeping your tools sharp. And if I'm only doing it 3 hours a day, it doesn't really affect family situations. Back then the kids were little. I do it now, just me and my wife. But I'm also the caretaker for my wife. She has Alzheimer's, and I deal with that. I have people that come in and help me a little bit, but I keep that same schedule. It's I'm either a writer or I'm not. And the idea is, I keep putting money in the coffers, but I'm at a point now in my life I could quit writing. But why? Why would I do that?
No, I think that's death. If you quit doing something you love, if you quit working, that's when men die.
Robert Silverberg said to me that he told himself that when he wasn't having fun anymore, he'd quit. And that's when he quit. But he had tons of stuff. And he was in his 80s, I guess, when he quit, late 70s anyway. And, I'm 71. I still feel pretty vital. I don't feel like I've lost my touch, so to speak. In fact, in some ways, I think I'm doing better work than I've ever done. I'm just not doing the same work. And one of the problems you get caught up in is 2 things that you have to watch is people want you to write the same kind of story over and over. You don't want to do that. And if that's all they want to read, then they're just shit out of luck. And then they not only is they want you to write the same story over and over, they want you to write within the same genre repeatedly, which I do none of those things. And the idea is that I'm the one that's supposed to be happy. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how many little ducks they got to take care of. I hope the ducks are fine and have their own pond, whatever. But it's not my problem. My problem is to write this story. And then individually, under other circumstances, I can care about them and their ducks. But when I finish a novel, then I hope people like it. But when I'm writing it, I can't care. That's just the wrong way for me to produce something, is to think, well, I wonder if old Billy will like this. But what if I say fuck? And will they be offended? And if I say this or I say that, will so and so be offended? You can't write like that. And writing is supposed to be offensive. You hear that you have sensitivity reader. I want the insensitivity reader. I want the person that says, yeah, go for it. Make people upset. Make people think. Make people, consider that writing is not about pretty manners. And I'm not suggesting you should write about something you don't want to write about, but the people that want to come in and police what you do are that's fascism on the left or the right. Either ones that want to do that. That's why I love Mark Twain, because both ends want to cancel him, the right and the left. They both want to cancel him, and they're both wrong. And I just think that you've got to keep that in mind, that if you write like everybody is dead, then you're not worried if you're going to offend somebody, because you know what? You're going to, even if you try not to. And I've seen some of the sensitivity reader stuff that just makes me, want to shit a swirly. I never understand, how some people will get offended over the silliest, dumb shit that people say every day. And it's not the words, or it's the context. If I'm writing about racism, I'm writing about racist. I mean to make that for it to hurt, because I want people to know how bad that is. I grew up around racism, and it's left a scar on me. And so it appears in a lot of my work, but I don't want to sugarcoat it. I want it to be just like what it was. And I want to be able to make that statement. And generally, I do the best I can, that unless you're an idiot, it's clear that I'm not being racist. I'm talking about racist. And some people, if they just see a singular word of any kind, they're absolutely out of their minds. They don't even read the context, And I can think like Huckleberry Finn and To Kill a Mockingbird. I was on a panel once with a black writer, very smart guy, nice guy, but he was saying that he thought maybe those ought to be taken off the list as for, master works and all that. And because they weren't written by a black writer. And my take was that, look, that's a white person's entryway into understanding racism. And it's been very helpful to a lot of black readers too. But, I also read black writers, I always have. But what started me doing it was Twain and Harper Lee, because I grew up in racism. I didn't even know it was racist. It was just how things were. I'm a little kid. And then I read these books and I go, oh my God, totally have a different perspective suddenly. And then I want to know what black writers have to say about this. And then I got involved in civil rights. But I needed books that were powerful and books that didn't flinch, Yeah. And the other thing too is there's people going to write stuff I don't agree with and I'm not going to like, but I don't want to censor them. Let us all be idiots on our own without other people trying to help us.
I want to give you a standing ovation, because now there's this weird thing with horror writers in particular wanting to censor everything. And I'm like, it's a fucking horror novel. Like,
horror is
it's supposed to be crazy.
And when it's good, it's about dealing with social and political issues. It's about dealing with human problems. It's sometimes it's just there for a scare. That's fine too. There's not a damn thing wrong with that. But I think my nature, maybe growing up in the 50s and 60s, is that I bring that to probably 90% of my work. The other 10%, I may not bring that at all, but I bring something that's socially, like the Donut Legion is very much a social novel, but it's funny. And it's got exciting moments. But if you read the novel, you realize, oh, he's talking about this, but I've done it in such a way that it's entertaining to me and hopefully to others. And that I've also been able to say the things I want to say about stupidity, because we're in a wave of stupidity. And I don't care if you're on the left or if you're on the right, both extremes are the same people. You meet in the back and shake hands because you're really the same assholes.
It's all so refreshing to hear, Joe, because I I don't want to get into what I don't like about the
I
industry and
understand.
the horror stuff in general, but I will say that you are the reason why um, the Western that I wrote, it's the way it is because of you, because without you, I wouldn't have had the balls to do some of the stuff in there that dealt with racism, because I didn't want to get called out or anything, because
Yeah.
people are forgetting that these are books, this is fiction, and that if you use certain words, it doesn't matter that you're portraying a bad guy here. It's like watching a
Yeah.
prison movie, but nobody swears and nobody has a tattoo. Just doesn't make
Yeah.
any kind
And
of
you're
sense.
making a statement. Sometimes
Yeah.
even good people don't act perfect. They may say words that people don't like. They may
Yeah.
have views that aren't entirely lovable. And sometimes, and people are complex. And when I was growing up, some of the most racist people I knew treated everybody pretty much the same. And then later on, some of the most liberal people I knew were only liberal by mouth, not by action. So it's a combination, and I hear all of these people saying, well, you can't say this. And in horror, we want to be inclusive. And goddamn right, we want to be inclusive. Why not? I mean, I want characters that run. I was writing about gay characters, black characters, and stuff in the 89 and 90. Happen Leonard, those. There was nobody doing that. There were people saying, "Why are you doing that? Those. Why are you writing about those people?" And then a few years back, and this happens a lot, I had a guy come up to me and say, "You know what your books did for me?" He said, "They helped me let go of hate." He said, "I hated black people, I hated gay people," and said, then one day when I was reading those books and I'm laughing, I realized they're people. And I thought that was one of the most important moments for
Yeah.
me in my writing. And it's not the only time that's happened, but I remember that was specifically because he was standing in line with books to be signed. And he was talking, and he was a big guy, looked like a motorcycle type of guy, with the tattoos. In other words, the cliche, really. And I appreciated that so much. And I thought, and he's not the only one, by the way, but I thought, this is why you write. You write to entertain, but you write to impact. And that comes out of my civil rights in the 60s and all. And you used to have things like National Lampoon, which could lampoon anything, but you weren't supposed to think, oh, they think that. What they did, they were making fun of that. You can sometimes, some of the ugliest things you make fun of by showing them openly for what they are. And they used to do that. Now they would never make those movies now. And I think it's a shame, because that stuff, I think, is what made the people in the 60s understand. I hear about, the boomers, and what they forget is we're the civil rights guys. We're the guys that were the hippies. We were the guys that were the ones saying people ought to have the same rights, that maybe you ought to think about how you want to live. Do you really want to live this way? Do you want an alternative to live? It doesn't mean everybody had to do those things, but then, and toward the end of that, the beginning of the 70s, you had women's rights, you had gay rights. All that came out of the boomers, not to mention technology towards the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s. So when I see all these things about the boomers, I say, who the fuck are those guys? That doesn't mean that many of those people later didn't turn into somebody else, but there's a lot of people just like me. One reason I'm a writer is I always wanted to be. And second, because even though you're always dealing with the man to some degree, I have a lot more autonomy. I'm me. And if I don't like the publisher, I don't have to keep publishing there. And I always tell people, if you're reading my books and you're offended, quit reading it. I'm not making you read it. Stop. Don't hurt yourself. You'll poke your eye out. Just stop.
Chad, do you have anything else? That feels like a great stopping point to me.
That's good. I can talk to Joe. I love Joe.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. Stick
Of
around
course.
just for a second as we close this out. But
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Yeah,
so
it was a real honor. Thank you.
I think.